going to ask our next panel to come up while I'm introducing the moderator, please. The new tactics of the left, something we all need to be paying attention to. And just one note, after this panel, there is a special guest for 25 minutes that you don't want to miss. Leonard Leo from the Federalist Society will be talking about judges, the all-important judges who stay with us for years and years beyond the next elections. So please don't leave the room for that. We want you for that. So Ken Blackwell is no stranger to this group. I encourage you to read his resume. It's quite impressive. I mean, he's on the board of the National Rifle Association. He's on the board of the Timothy Plan, of the Club for Growth. He was an officer, secretary, and treasurer for the state of Ohio and many, many other amazing positions. He's a man with great expertise. He serves on the executive committee of the Council for National Policy. But one of the things that I'm most proud of that I've been working on was partly because of Ken's leadership, and that was the recent prison reform initiative that finally passed the Senate and the House, the First Step Act, and our president signed into law. And it was an honor to work with this man who is a real leader among leaders. Ken, I'm going to turn it over to you now. Please help me welcome Ken Blackwell.
Thank you, Rebecca. Listening to that generous introduction, I'm reminded of something Dizzy Dean once said after such a gracious and generous introduction. He said, you know, the older I get, the greater I was. We have a distinguished panel, a panel that their experience and expertise spans decades. These are all members of the Council for National Policy. I'm going to introduce them and then have a brief set of remarks, and they will then come to the podium in the order of introduction. Our first panelist will be Brent Bozell. Brent is founder and president of the Media Research Center, founder and chairman of For America, and founder of CNSnews.com. He is the co-author of the award-winning Collusion, How the Media Stole the 2012 Election, and 3 other books. Following Brent will be Chad Connelly. Chad is the founder and president of Faith Wins, an organization created to maximize relationships with faith leaders to influence American political process for conservative change. Previously, he was the first ever national director of faith engagement for the Republican National Committee. Our third speaker will be John Funn. John is the national affairs columnist for National Review. He worked for the Wall Street Journal for more than 2 decades, starting in 1984, and was a member of the newspaper's editorial board from 1995 to 2001. He collaborated with another one of our special guests on the action panel in the book, Who's Counting? How Fraudsters and Bureaucrats Put Your Vote at Risk. And so that is the panel. We, in fact, are going to talk about the new tactics of the left. But while they might be new tactics, they still have the same game plan. And that is to strategically define and defeat us. And so if you begin with the basic understanding that Lewis Carroll spoke to us through his character, Humpty Dumpty, when Humpty Dumpty said, "He who defines is the master." And so there is a constant drum roll for defining and use of narratives to not only affect policy, but to, in fact, gerrymander and affect process. In 2019 and 2020, there will be an architecture that is developed to do two things, and that is to advance a policy agenda by changing the composition of legislative bodies. And one way that they're going to do this is by changing the electorate. They will use ballot initiatives to drive out their base vote. And this is not necessarily a new tactic, but we will probably see it manifest itself in a number of different ways. They're going to use the marijuana issue in some key states to do this. But I would just let you know that they weren't the first ones to invent this strategy or tactic. I'll just give you an impression of how important this is. In 2004, George Bush would not have won election if the marriage amendment defining marriage as a union between a man and a woman had not been on the ballot in Ohio. He won Ohio by about 160,000 votes. If there had been a change of about 85,000 votes, he would have lost. He had a record turnout of African Americans driven by evangelicals in the African American community who came out to vote for that ballot initiative and took note of which presidential candidate was for it and which presidential candidate that was not for it. He got 18% of the African American vote in that year. But more importantly, what we need to understand is that elections are won precinct by precinct. And again, I give you historical perspective. In 1976, we in fact watched Jimmy Carter beat Ford. He beat Ford in Ohio by about 13,000 votes, which was about 1 vote per precinct. And so what we have to understand is that precinct by precinct in strategic states, you drive ballots, or you drive voters out by what's on the ballot. You try to change the composition of the electorate to your advantage. That's an old tactic in a new sheepskin. And so we, in fact, will watch this play out over the course of this next 2 years. But to give you perspective on how they're going to change messaging, how they're going to try to change the composition, and some of the newer tactics that they're using, we have this illustrious panel. So Brent, you're on.
All right. Thank you, Ambassador. Is Larry Solov in the room? Larry, you in the room? Okay. I missed part of Larry's presentation this morning, so I may repeat some of the things he said. But it's my intention to want to continue Larry's conversation because I think it's the single most important conversation that the conservative movement needs to have today. And Larry, I will say, is the single most important person in this conversation in that he and Breitbart have been targeted for extinction unlike any other organization in this country. But they are serving as a bellwether for what is happening, what is about to hit the conservative movement. I don't want my comments to be misconstrued. I don't want to say the end is coming to the world as we know it, because CNP or Council for National Policy is going to do something about it, so the end won't come. When I started the Media Research Center in 1987, the idea, my thinking was that the left controlled every element of the news media. So if conservatives wanted to get their story out to the American people, they had to recognize that if you didn't do something about the media, nothing of substance was ever going to get out. That was twinkle toes compared to what we're facing today and what's about to hit us. Folks, this is not in our country. This is worldwide. We are looking right down the barrel of the single most extraordinary effort at censorship worldwide in the history of mankind. How's that for a superlative? And it's absolutely true. When you consider that Twitter reaches hundreds of millions of people, that Facebook reaches 2.2 billion people, I really don't care what NBC raises at this point. What do we need to know about these giants? Some documents have come out in recent months. One was leaked to Breitbart. This was a Google memo from Eliana Murillo, the multicultural marketing director, in a memo that she sent to her higher-ups on November 9th. This is what she wrote. Despite Google's power, 71% of Latinos voted for Hillary, and that was not enough. Then she said, it's devastating to our Democratic Latino community. Then she said, I'm in shock, and it hurts more than I could have imagined. Loss is a part of life. It's time to work harder. And her superiors wrote down and told her how proud they were of her. Google is now has given $250,000 to the Southern Poverty Law Center, is now paying for anyone who volunteers to work for the Southern Poverty Law Center, they're paying them to do it. If whoever has not seen The Creepy Line, you must watch it, and as a member of the executive committee, I'm going to really be pushing the CNP to do an airing of The Creepy Line. It will show you, just think about this one number. Google, through its search engine, now it's been documented scientifically, they have the power to move up to 80% of an undecided vote in a campaign. Let me repeat that. 80% of an undecided vote in a campaign they can move. Tell me that Google isn't powerful today. Facebook. Facebook calls itself the open marketplace of ideas. Did you know Facebook has 15,000 employees to monitor content? They have 1,400 pages of rules of content. They have 200 pages devoted to the word hate. And that, folks, is you. 200 pages. They are actively censoring pro-life organizations, pro-Trump organizations, pro-gun organizations. When on the eve of Roe v. Wade, that film that Roe v. Wade, on the eve of the National Right to Life March, the filmmakers of Roe v. Wade had their advertisements pulled. They couldn't sell ads. Here's a good one. Franklin Graham was censored on it. They later put him on. They said that was a mistake to put him on there. There was a blog that was removed on July 4th of last year. You know what the blog included? The Declaration of Independence. At the same time, you've got organizations like Smash Racism. That's the Antifa group that targeted Tucker Carlson's house and terrorized his wife. By the way, Larry won't tell you, they've gone after him too. He's on a list. There's several people on a list to be targeted by this group. They're still on Facebook. They haven't been removed. Louis Farrakhan is still on there. Numerous other people are on there. I'm racing through this. I've got 4 minutes and 53 seconds. John Kyle was brought in to get information from conservative organizations, to grab facts, to take them over to Facebook. What were our complaints? And just to produce the facts to them, what we had to say. At the same time, there was another organization that was put together from the left to fact gather. This turned out to be a group. Remember what Larry said this morning, where he said, we don't want big tech companies to control content. The left doesn't want big tech companies to control content. They want to control content. Here's your evidence. The left came out with their interim report. 90 so-called civil rights organizations came out with this. They demanded that they get to participate in content moderation over the elections. They made that demand. They actually worked with Facebook, at Facebook, putting together this report. When they came out with it, Sheryl Sandberg, the second in command of Facebook, said it was going to be her highest priority in 2019 to give them that. So just think about that when you're on Facebook. Twitter. Jack Dorsey has come right out and declared war on us. He has said, I don't believe that we can afford to take a neutral stance anymore. That's the official position now of Twitter. There was a situation in Portland where a cop shot a guy. A former mayoral candidate attacked the police. Lark Larson, the talk show host, defended the police because he pointed out that the police was a paranoid schizophrenic. He had invaded a stranger's home. He had fought with a cop, and he had pulled a knife. Lark Larson was suspended for saying that. We had a reporter who was suspended because he said that Don Lemon, the anchor for CNN, was drunk at a New Year's Eve presentation. Now, why did we say that? Because Carol Brown, or Brooke Baldwin of CNN, had put out a tweet saying #drunk John Lemon, had bragged about it. So why was our guy banned? This is their answer. I'm not making this up. Because we had promoted violence against, threatened, or harassed other people on the basis of race, ethnicity, national origin, sexual orientation, gender identity, religious affiliation, age, disability, or serious disease, for calling him a drunk. So we got knocked up. 4 members of Congress have been shadow banned. They're all members of the Freedom Caucus. The Covington commercial, the fake thing that triggered all this problem, that was taken down. What was left up? What's still up there? A post that said, I've got to edit this out. If we could wipe these families out, we would be in such a better place. F this, S-H-I-T, lock these kids in school and burn that B to the ground. That's still up there. If you say Bruce Jenner, the word Bruce Jenner, you're banned from Twitter. Bruce is now called a dead name, which is the name you had before you transgendered into something else. If you say the words women aren't men, you're banned from Twitter. One person has been banned. A professor in Canada was banned for this. Microsoft, they now have news guards that take down pages, and they now are downgrading things like Breitbart, and they're downgrading Drudge, so big red flags. They've also funded, they've had a board member who's admitted he has been funding several campaigns using social media for character assassination. He's apologized for that. Amazon is taking out Islamophobic information, but they'll keep up anti-Christian bigotry. PayPal is now actively refusing to process checks for Christian organizations. And here's a great paradox in all of this. Any organization that has been targeted can consider itself effective in the conservative movement. But anyone who fights these people is going to be targeted. Now, I'm going to talk in the next session, in the CNP action session, about things we can do. But I do want to leave you with this. If we don't do something about this, our entire cause is destroyed. Just consider the fact that if we don't do anything about this, worldwide, you're not going to be able to talk about Christianity. You're not going to be able to talk about freedom or about American exceptionalism. Just let that percolate. And then think about everything else that's important to us. And maybe I hope you'll agree with me, this is our #1 concern. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm honored to be here. I'm Chad Connelly, and I've been a member for a long time. And I just got to say, these are heroes. All of you are. So much of my worldview has been shaped by being around y'all, and I'm just honored. But, we like to think of ourselves as well-informed, don't we? This is probably one of the more well-informed rooms that you'll be in this year, is a group of CNP people. I raise money. I do fundraising, and yet what I'm going to talk about is really something that's come out of left field for me and a lot of people in the political, spiritual, even fundraising world. This came to me and kind of dropped in my lap. One of my best friends is a prayer buddy. One of my just real closest spiritual friends is Congressman Jeff Duncan from Clinton, South Carolina. You know, I live on the prosperity side of that. Clinton to the left, prosperity to the right. And so he lives in the correct Clinton. And we have this Waffle House Summit, and he's had a re-elect this year against a lefty teacher from a little town called Pendleton, South Carolina. And Jeff was saying, this lady knows nobody, and she has raised $200,000. This was a few weeks before the election this fall. Turned out she raised over $250,000. 90-something% was from out of state and mostly small donors. And he said, hey, it's that group, Act Blue. Have you heard about it? I said, yeah, I'm kind of familiar. I really wasn't, but I kind of heard about it, like probably a lot of you. Right after that, I had my best donor who's written me money for the party and for the RNC and for my C3 and for some of your organizations. She called me and said, Chad, we're going to get our clocks cleaned in November. My husband and I want to donate to 10 of your favorite conservative candidates. Who are they? I called Mark Meadows. I called Jeff Duncan. Hey, give me 10 people that you think might be in trouble in the House and the Senate. So Karen goes online and she maxes, was it $2,700 a person, she and her husband, to 10 conservative candidates, House and Senate. She waited about a week and she called me back and said, send me 10 more. We're going to go ahead and do 20 because we're so worried about the Trump agenda losing steam in Congress. They maxed to 20 candidates. Afterwards, she called me back. That's $108,000 if you're adding it up. She said, you know, it just was stupid, silly. I had to go to 20 websites. I had to enter my credit card 20 different times and my address 20 different times. That made me start looking into ActBlue. We don't have a counter yet. They're being developed, but Glenn's going to put up our PowerPoint. I'm going to go through some stuff here and we won't get through all of this because we're going to do the action session next. I hope you'll come and I'll give you some of the solutions and where our side is heading. We've never been very good at the small dollar donors. We just haven't been. Next slide, please. Well, I got my little clicker here, don't I? They began with the scream. A lot of y'all remember this. It ended the Howard Dean presidency, his effort, but it led to something they started thinking, hey, we're on to something. It's the small dollar donors. Give $3 here, give $5 here. Joe Trippi said after the election and after he had lost the primary, something I think is really important and we need to pay attention to. I like to say that we at the Dean campaign were the Wright brothers. We put this rickety thing together and got it off the ground, but the folks in Obama's online team are the Apollo project. The question is, are they Apollo 8 or Apollo 11? If they're Apollo 11, they're going to launch a guy and land him in the White House. Well, the rest is history. And you think about what in the world they do. Now, you remember they had a little bit of baffling time between Obama for America and then Organizing for America. It's all about who owns the data. Who owns that information, your stuff you put in. It's a battle. Are they federal dollars? Are they hard dollars and it's all personal? Are they soft dollars in corporate and business? So they went through this tumultuous time and then they started figuring something out. And this is where the research led me over the last few months. And I talked to Bob McEwen. He said, I want you to talk about this at CNP. I said, well, Bob, this is not really fully my orbit. I'm in fundraising, but I think it's something we better get informed about. So when the Obamas came to Williams-Brice Stadium, and I'm a Clemson guy, that's my rival, but we were paying attention. I was involved in the state GOP at that time. I'd not run for state party chairman, but we were tracking. We had hired young people to video it, and we were stunned. This is 2008, and the Obamas come to Williams-Brice Stadium. Some 35,000 people were there. My insider buddies in the Democratic Party in South Carolina told me they collected over 20,000 cell phone numbers that day. And a lot of y'all remember the number. I was talking this with my comms guy the other day, and he said, remember, text 6282, $5, give $10, just give a little bit of money. They went through these steps, and they figured out the key was the small dollar donor. Now, the Obamas did pretty good because they built an online database of over 3 million people. They ended up having an average donated online of about $160. They built this juggernaut that nobody really matched, and it was mostly small dollar donors. Remember that? He'd stand in a crowd in a field or something. Hey, just text 62282, $10, and people did it by the drove. So I was involved in some of the campaigns, obviously, in South Carolina, and I would ask the McCain campaign and their consultants, how are you guys doing in collecting cell phone numbers? Are you doing anything with the cell phone numbers? Anybody want to guess when the McCain campaign began collecting cell phone numbers? A week after the election. A week after the election. And we were that far behind. And so out of that, they said, hey, we're on to something here. We're going to do this. This is a screenshot I took on Tuesday when I was speaking in California. This is what ActBlue has become. They were formed in June of 2004. And here's the secret. They're not part of the DNC. This is not allegedly Democratic National Committee folks. These are behind-the-scenes people that own this organization. And here's what ActBlue has gotten really good at. That's over $3 billion they've raised. Now, about $1.5 billion of that apparently was raised in this last cycle. I've been told by digital and data experts, now with the RNC and with other consultants, they believe, ActBlue believes, that their capacity in the 2020 cycle is between $2.5 and $3 billion. Now let that sink in. If a school teacher in Pendleton, South Carolina, which is in Anderson County, one of the most conservative congressional districts in America, raises $250,000 for a congressional campaign against a solid conservative like my buddy Jeff Duncan, they can do it anywhere. And the way it works is it's one click. You go and you put your name and address, your employer, all that stuff that the feds require. You put your credit card in one time, and then you click and you say, hey, I'd like to support a city council person in Newberry, South Carolina, where I live, or maybe a congressional candidate in Montana, or a Senate candidate in Florida. And then when you pick different candidates, it floats in and repopulates with suggestions of other like-minded candidates. That's how far ahead they are. They're 10 years ahead of us because they've mastered the small donor path to getting to people, because they've done it like for 10 years now, and we're just getting started. Where are we at? We are way behind. This is something they've mastered because they became intentional about it. So Bob and I met with a guy who's put together something. I'll wait for the action session in a little bit to go through this in detail. But they have put together an alternative. Here's what I want to tell you. First, we better get informed. We need to find alternatives. For my C3, we use Antidote. Many of you use Antidote. In fact, 43 of the 50 state GOP party organizations use Antidote. Antidote does no suggestion. It doesn't repopulate automatically. They are just now working on an SMS capability. You can't text your number to them yet. They don't have multiple candidates. They don't have it where you can have people from different states to get money just because there's somebody that you like. We're so far behind in this, but now they finally put something together. The RNC just signed an agreement with the Trump campaign, and they're going to make an organization called Patriot Pass. It's going to be kicking off in the next few months, but they'll tell you, in fact, they tamped down the expectations when they talked to the congressional members this past week. They know this is going to take an awful long time to build up to the point they can be competitive. So for us at CNP, we need to get informed. Your ministry, your organization, how are you raising money? Make sure you find out about it. And then you got to ask yourself, is the platform I'm looking at going to allow for a conservative, a Christian, a pro-life candidate that we like? If it's driven by the vendors and the consultants, don't bet on it. So look around and find out what the alternatives are before you choose who you're going to put your money at, and we'll see you in the action session and go into more detail on this in just a minute. Thank you.
Until I heard Larry Solov and Brent Bozell today, I thought I'd seen and heard it all of what the totalitarian left is up to. I was wrong. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. I even lived in the city of San Francisco. I have never lived in a zip code where anyone agreed with me. But the picture they paint is frightening, it's real, and it's upon us. But I have a modest suggestion. It's easy to get angry, it's easy to get outraged, but that's not the primary focused, targeted response we need to make. It is very difficult to convince people that the left has truly bad motives, that they are totalitarian, authoritarian. What you can do is observe their behavior and objectively label it crazy, which it is. We have come a long way since 1996, when I and Ann Coulter were hired as the first conservative analysts at MSNBC when it launched. And I've often been asked, how has cable television changed, or how has MSNBC changed? Well, back in 1996, the left was self-confident enough to have debates. Now, of course, if you watch MSNBC, there is no debate. That gives us a clue that they're lacking self-confidence. They won't debate us. They don't want to debate us. They want to smear us. So I'm happy to debate them, but if they don't want to debate, we'll just tell the truth about them. And here's how we do it. In 2018, we lost the midterms because they had incredible message discipline. They wanted to talk about impeachment. They wanted to talk about crazy stuff. And instead, they talked about pre-existing conditions, and they won. Well, since the election, it won't shock you that victory has brought arrogance and insanity. They have gone completely bonkers. I'll just name the one name, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. That's all you need to know. And then we have Nancy Pelosi. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Nancy Pelosi for 20 years has been quoting some Bible verse about how we have to take care of our brothers and sisters keepers. And she finally was nailed on it by a fact checker, and this is her response. I can't find it in the Bible, but I quote it all the time. And I keep reading the Bible, and I know it's there someplace. It's supposed to be in Isaiah. To administer to the needs of God's creation is an act of worship. It's there somewhere. I know it is. Look, let's not get angry at them. Let's make fools of them. Look, sarcasm, as you know, is the most effective weapon. It's the most difficult to craft and aim and hit someone with, but it is the most effective weapon. And boy, do we have material. The big Green Deal. Look, I think Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, whom I have met and talked with, is a sincere person. I'm convinced that her chief of staff, Saiket Chakraborty, is a sleeper agent for our side. I think we recruited him at Harvard 15 years ago. The job of a sleeper agent is to do your job effectively and well until you reach the maximum possible level of influence. The signal is sent from mission control, and suddenly you become the world's greatest incompetent. I mean, seriously, abolishing air travel, outlawing stakes, forcing all American homeowners to retrofit their houses, putting every miner, oil rigger, livestock rancher, and gas station attendant out of a job, spending trillions and trillions. You can't make this stuff up. Oh, and people unwilling to work should get a guaranteed annual income. Not willing to work, unwilling to work. So, they've handed us this material. But it has real consequences. That's not funny. Look, I was not a fan of the crony capitalism that Governor Cuomo and Mayor de Blasio in New York used to try to entice Amazon. But after all, everyone was giving them tax incentives and breaks, so, that's the game they were playing. But now, as you know, yesterday Amazon pulled out of New York. One person did that, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The Siena College poll, which is out this morning, New York State residents had supported the Amazon deal 56 to 36. Blacks supported it 70 to 25. Latinos 81 to 17. Democrats 56 to 37. Brad Smith, who's a member of CNP, suggests, gosh, there should be a Democratic primary challenge to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez from the left. That would be funny. She just cost 25,000 jobs in her own district. In her own district. Now, let me give you some quick numbers here, and I can give you the link to this. Remember Newt Gingrich said, you run on issues where you have 80% of the people behind you. We have a big one here. It's called political correctness. Cato study, over 60% of people say political correctness means that they are afraid to share their own views with people they know. But here's Exhibit 1. The Atlantic magazine, one of their leading left-wing magazines, quoting a group called More in Common, a leading left-wing group, which has conducted an amazing study on political correctness. Among the general population, a full 80% believe it is a problem in our country, including 74% of those aged 24 to 29, 79% under age 24. In other words, the woke are a minority among their own proclaimed constituents. Whites are slightly less likely than average to believe political correctness is a problem. Asians, 82%. Hispanics, 87%. American Indians, 88%. As one American Indian activist told their focus group, It seems like every day you wake up, something has changed. Do you say Jew or Jewish? Is it a black guy, an African American? You're always on your toes because you never know what to say. So political correctness in that sense is scary to me and my friends. 3/4 of African Americans oppose political correctness. Who does support it? Well, 70% of progressive activists do, only 70%. And what are they, progressive activists? Well, they are an elite. And Americans have a long tradition of being suspicious of elites and a long tradition of making fun of elites. The people behind political correctness are rich, they're highly educated, and they're white. With the exception of the tribe of devoted conservatives, activists, which is probably around 5% in the country, progressive activists are the most racially homogenous group in the entire country. Yes, we need to be more diverse among ourselves. They're even less diverse in some respects. So, I think we're on the cusp of making them look foolish and crazy. Take your pick. Now, I know that there are 3 things in social situations people are most uncomfortable with. They're most uncomfortable with public speaking. That does not apply to this group. You're extremely articulate. I hear you all the time at these meetings. Dancing. People are afraid of dancing in public. And they're also afraid of telling a joke in public. So not all of us are blessed with a good sense of humor. I'm here to tell you, with material like this, you don't have to have a sense of humor. All you have to do is report what they do and report what they say. I think we need to have a project. I think we need to have a website devoted just to making fun of political correctness. Brent Bozell's website, newsbusters.org, can give you all the material you want. Joe Scarborough this morning attacked Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez as crazy. Joe Scarborough and MSNBC can do it. Oh boy, we can do it. Between now and 2020, all we have to do is convince the American people they're crazy. Don't have to say they're totalitarian, don't have to say they're evil, they're just crazy. And if we do that, I think we win. Because the American people are suspicious of radical change, as exemplified by the big Green Deal, and they're certainly suspicious of people who want to lord it over the rest of us and be nannies and telling us what to do and what to say and what to think. And the last paragraph of the study on political correctness in the Atlantic magazine could be the epitaph of the left if we do our job properly. In a democracy, it is difficult to win your fellow citizens over to your own side or to build public support to remedy perceived injustices when you fundamentally misunderstand how your fellow citizens see the world and who they are. They have no way of thinking outside their bubble. In fact, political correctness means they're scared to think outside their bubble. And in conclusion, remember the dictionary definition of political correctness in the Urban Dictionary, which is the best dictionary out there, because they tell it like it is. Political correctness, they say, has a basic flaw. If all views are equal, as the left tells us, if everything is morally relative, why do some of them embrace the view and feel the need to push their own agenda as the correct one at the same time demonizing other views as incorrect? There's a fundamental flaw in logic and in execution in political correctness. We can exploit it, we can make fun of it, and we can have fun making fun of them. Thank you.
Now each one of our panelists, if you put the table mics on, we'll have 90 seconds to 2 minutes of closing remarks now that they've heard the other presentations, starting with Brent.
Thank you, Ambassador. I want to say that you should disagree with John Fund at your own peril. Some years ago, John and I were discussing the Jesse Helms re-election campaign, and I told him there was no way that Helms could win. And he bet me a dinner. I still haven't paid for it yet, but I lost. And Helms was supposed to lose. And afterwards, I said, "Well, how did you know?" And he said, "Because I always know." And then he admitted to me he'd won 36 straight dinners. So don't bet him. one thing that we have to think about where this whole thing is concerned and on the censorship issue is that it's happening because we've been successful, because we have made inroads in social media, or else they wouldn't be coming after us, and that's very important. What John said, though, I think is the most important thing attitudinally. We do have to be happy warriors. I think we do get too glum in this business because there are all these problems. But I want to leave you with this. We as a movement have since Ronald Reagan, we've been on defense. We're always looking at what the left is doing, and we're always worrying and fighting back against the left. This gives us a wonderful opportunity to be forward-thinking. And I think that it's the challenge of conservatives and the challenge of the CNP to be forward-thinking in this debate, to come up with our own ideas and start promoting our own ideas instead of constantly having to fight them on theirs. And that applies to everything we're talking about here. Thank you.
Chad?
Yeah, amen to what Brent said. I've told pastors all over the country, speaking to them, you know, our side, we don't play offense at all, and we're terrible at defense. And I think that's really our problem. We play reactive politics. You know, we're getting killed in the small donor stuff. Sure. Part of this came about, if y'all remember President Trump now, when he was candidate Trump, he spent a lot of time saying, I don't need your money. And he was right. That's one of the greatest things. He can't be bought. And we love that about him. And he's not beholden to the swamp dwellers and the political interests and the lobbyists and so forth. But at the same time, there were a lot of people that would have started giving those little dollars to the Trump organization. When Bob McCune and I had lunch with one of the digital guys, and he was working on this solution that our side's come up with, he asked the right question. I'd already asked it. Bob said, what's taking so long? And he said, well, obviously there's a tension between the campaign and the party, and it's all about who owns the data. Who gets to keep your information? And so I think where a group of us is headed is, what if there was a conservative clearinghouse that actually auto-suggested conservative candidates like a Brent Bozell or a John Funn or a Ken Blackwell running, as opposed to maybe the acceptable candidates that the swamp or the party or the establishment might choose themselves. So please come to the action session. We're going to talk about this in a little bit more detail. But the biggest thing is get informed about Act Blue. I took that screenshot on Tuesday. It was $3.1 billion. They're going to be somewhere over $3.2, $3.3 billion very soon. And they're killing us through the small dollar donations. And we have to make that up because our people want to support candidates too.
John?
I'll just repeat that, first of all, Brent is far too kind. I am wrong every day of my life before breakfast. I just don't bet dinner.
You want to bet?
I'm certain I'm
You want
right.
to bet?
I did make a fundamental mistake. I bet someone dinner that Donald Trump would not win the Republican nomination, and I was wrong. Other than that, I'm at 98% still. Look, snarky millennials, we have a lot in our movement. We can recruit more. Get them to make fun of the left. They love to, you know, the old hijinks of Young Americans for Freedom, we need to update them for the digital age, and we need to set them on making fun of them. Charlie Kirk and Turning Point is doing some of that on the college campuses. Other groups are doing it. Let's set the young people to make fun of the left-wing young people. And if we do that, I think Brent had a very important phrase, happy warriors. We have to be happy warriors. We know we're right. We're convinced if we just reach a majority of the American people, they will agree with us. Let's believe we can, let's believe we will, and let's be happy in our fight for that.
Thank you, John. Ladies and gentlemen, some takeaways. Message, money, muscle, old-fashioned organization, and mechanics, process. What we challenge in court, what we defend in terms of voter ID, what we cleaning up voter rolls, because the left is running a campaign of voters without borders. They will, in fact, move them around at need. The reality is that I want to just close on muscle. Muscle is old-fashioned organization. It's neighbor to neighbor, church member to church member, working door to door, putting a human face on and in couple with the use of technology. There's no reason why we can't engage people in honest dialogue and convincing discussions about what is in the interest of moving America forward. So it is in those areas that in the action session, we will go into deeper detail. You know, money, message, muscle or organization, and mechanics. We will be joined by the lawyer frequently known as Hans, because nobody can pronounce his last name, in the next action session. But I want to thank these panelists for their input and their insight. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good to see you, brother. Oh, well done. That's true.
Thank you, panel, and thank you, Ken, for a great job. So informative. Don't forget the action sessions a little bit later on.